Hello everybody, Tytar Jr. Today I'm going to be showing you the brand new fighting system that I have added to my single player adventure game inside of Warcraft Reforged. This is completely unique. I haven't seen anything like this personally. Maybe something like this exists out there. But this includes a custom fighting style. This also includes a fight camera, and it's kind of like it zooms out a little bit, you'll see. And as you can see here, we don't have any attack damage, which is what makes this trigger so interesting in the way it's set up. So I would love to show you guys the new fighting system that I've added to this game. So if we go and run around a little bit, as you can see, we've got the resources populating and everything, but that's not the purpose of today's video. Get my guy turned around here. So we have a little, kind of a rundown little area just to kind of test this out. And we've got a bandit right here. So I'm going to go ahead and run towards him. And as you can see, he is now attacking me. And he's got an arrow above his head. And if I run away from him, it zooms out, but it zooms back in as it gets closer to me again. So this is the camera system aspect of the new fighting system I've developed. Now, what's really cool, and it does have one glitch, but it's not super common to encounter. Hopefully I don't encounter it in this video. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how you fight. So I've got my target here and I'm going to right click. And first try I get the glitch, but I'll show you. There you go. So as you can see, every time I right click, he deals damage and then the damage value displays. And he dies. I'm no longer in combat. Camera resumes like normal. So let's go ahead and do a group fight. A 2-on-1. So what's really neat, as you can see, the secondary opponent, he kind of fades out. He's still fighting me. And so that way you can see which target is your target. And as I right click, every right click is an attack, because if you see, I'm not clicking. So it's whenever you right click on the opponent, you're going to attack and do damage. And then it automatically switches targets to the only one who's alive. And done. Camera reverts back to normal. And that is a demonstration of the new combat system I have added to this game. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the triggers behind this magic. So here we are now inside of the editor, and I have to give everybody a forewarning. If you guys are only interested in watching the feature itself be displayed, I would stop the video now. However, if you're curious about how to program something like this or trigger something like this, the rest of this video is for you. Otherwise, consider this video over, unless you would like to just stick around and watch how it was made. So we have two separate sets of triggers to make this happen. We have our attacks, and then we have our camera. So the very first trigger we're going to take a look at is fight camera turn on. So we're going to look at our camera system first. And so, as you can see, the event is a unit comes within 500 of, insert my characters here, and all of these different suits over here are the ones that the player is going to be using. And we are facilitating the suit changing with triggers. And so, basically, these units are getting swapped out, and then the player has the perception that you're switching outfits. So it's actually different units over here. And so basically, the way that the trigger works is whenever a unit comes within 500 of one of these suits, and the owner of the triggering unit is equal to neutral hostile, which is these creeps over here, because that's the team that they're on. And that's going to be the creeps while you're running around in the open world. Then we do turn off rotate facing angle as a trigger. And this trigger is the one where while you're not in combat and you click far away, the camera rotates to face the direction that your hero's facing so you can see what he's looking at. So we're going to turn that trigger off. That's the first thing that we're going to do. And so then we have to set a variable. Now, the reason for this is so that way we know which unit to reference, because we want this to be able to point to any unit that we're actually fighting, because new units might be spawning throughout the course of the game, and we don't want it to be isolated to, well, I have to build a trigger for this unit fighting, this unit fighting, this unit fighting. It's a variable. So we're going to set a variable, and I called it fight camera opponent lock. And I've set it to the triggering unit. So basically what that means is I set that unit variable to be the one who just procced this trigger. So the triggering unit, meaning the unit who came within range of one of these suits, who also happens to be neutral hostile, we're setting it to that unit. And then we apply our fight camera, and I will show you that. So fight camera, view selected camera. That's our fight camera. That's what it looks like. And then if I turn this off, that's kind of the angle. And you guys saw that too. So then I set the camera to sway. So that way when you're in the fighting, it feels a little bit more like you're in a moment with, or you're in combat with these other fighters. And so I have the camera swaying at a magnitude of 18 and a velocity of 1. And then we turn on these other triggers. So we turn on, I'll go into these triggers in a second, but we turn on the trigger called fight camera and runaway disable, turn on rotate fight camera, turn on new opponent as a trigger. Then we have to do the special effect create where the arrow is above their head. So we create the special effect over the head of fight camera opponent lock, which we set back here. And then it's the arrow, as you can see. Okay. And then we set a variable, which is a special effect variable. I called it target of attack, and we set the last created special effect to that. So that way in other triggers, I can reference that special effect, because otherwise the only option the editor gives me is to reference the last created special effect. Well, if I'm in a different trigger, it doesn't know which last special effect I'm referring to. So I set a variable so that way I can point to the variable. I'm not sure if that's making sense. Hopefully it does. So the first one we're going to look at is turn on fight camera and runaway disable. So as you can see, I don't have it initially on. So that way it's not firing every 0.1 seconds, because if I had this initially on, it would just be constantly running this trigger. And then we'd always have the fight camera turned on. So it turns on this trigger as soon as these conditions are met. And every 0.1 seconds of the game, we're locking the camera target for player 1 red, which is the main player, to random unit from units owned by player 1 red. I've mentioned this in other videos before, but when I reference random units owned by player 1 red, this only works for my game. It might work for yours as well. But with a single player game, I only have one unit at all times being associated with player 1 red, at least the way I have it built right now. And so when I reference a random unit from units owned by player 1 red, there's only one option, because there's only one unit at all times. So select randomly, it's going to be whichever suit it is I'm wearing. So that's how I have that work around there. So then, because it's going every 0.1 seconds, it's firing this trigger every 0.1 seconds while it's turned on. So we're setting the distance to target to real fight cam distance to target. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So I set a variable as well for, it's called fight cam distance to target. It's an integer variable. And essentially it's taking the base distance on that camera, distance to target, and establishing that as the variable. And you'll see why. Because what can happen is if I do arithmetic as my formula, because right now what this trigger is actually saying is I'm setting the distance to target to adjust based on how far apart the person you're fighting and you are. So that's how it's zooming out like this and zooming back in when you guys get close. It's actually doing math every 0.1 seconds. And so I had to have a base level to reference, a constant, if you will, which is the variable I set, which is distance to target on that fight camera. So I have a constant now, because what was happening is in arithmetic, when you have the distance to target and it's doing plus the distance between point of position of random unit owned by unit 1 red and position of fight camera opponent lock, which is the unit we set as our target. It was constantly adding to that over and over and over. And so no longer was my variable valid because my distance to target kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because now my distance to target just keeps building and building and building when it has no constant. And so that's why I had to put a constant in there. That's very, hopefully not complicated. I think that's probably pretty complicated. But basically what this trigger is doing, you guys can take a look at it right here. It's making it so it expands and shrinks based on the distance to target. And I'm doing it over 0.1 seconds, so that way it's a smoother transition as well. And then it fires every 0.1. Then we do an if then else statement. In many of my videos, I've already explained this, but I'll explain it again just in case. If then else, if is a condition, which basically means if these conditions are met, then do these actions. But if those are not met, what else would you like me to do? If then else statement. And so we have if, and I've got an or condition, which basically says if the distance between player one's controllable character and the position of the person that we're targeting, which was set in that variable, is greater than or equal to 700, meaning once they're really far away, if that is met, or the opponent we're fighting is alive equal to false, meaning they're dead. If either of those conditions are met, then we turn off the fight camera, we turn off the rotate fight camera, we turn off new opponent, we apply the old camera, we lock it to the unit, we turn on rotate facing angle, which is that original one that faces wherever we're facing. We turn the fight camera turn on trigger back on, so that way if we do re-engage, it does fire these triggers again. We destroy the special effect, we stop swaying the camera, we set the rotation to the angle we're already facing, and then we change the vertex coloring of every unit that's neutral hostile back to their original colors. So therefore we have disengaged combat, right? So if we're at 700 or greater distance, then we're gonna do this, and also if the unit is dead, or the unit is dead. At that point, we go ahead and expand all the way out. Else do nothing. And then lastly, once we've checked those or conditions to see if we're disengaging from combat, we do pick every units within 700 range of player one, and the owner of matching unit is, owned by neutral hostile. Then the if condition is going to be the picked unit is not equal to the variable we've set, which is fight camera opponent lock. So whenever we're engaging in combat, that trigger was previously set up. If you rewind the video a little bit, it's already set up to point to the person we're fighting, and that's who's getting set as the variable. So if they are not that person, and if they're within 700 range of our player, we're going to change all of those units to be 50% darker and 50% transparent. And that's why you see them dim out, and the focus has the arrow and they remain the normal color. So it makes it super easy to, as a player, to spot which person you're actually fighting. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's move on. And we're gonna go to turn on rotate fight camera. Very simple. So we turn this one on. Every 4 seconds of the game, it's gonna refire this trigger. Set player one red's camera rotation to the rotation of the current camera, plus random real number between -30 and 30, and we do it over 4 seconds. That's why when we're fighting, not only is it swaying, but it's also got this slight rotation. Sometimes it'll switch back, sometimes it'll go this way, and then a little bit more, and then it'll kind of go back this way. That way you're getting these different angles of attack. I do want to tweak this a little bit because there have been 1 or 2 moments where I'm trying to kill the unit, but because it rotated a little too much, that the other guy got in the way and I started targeting the wrong guy. So that could be kind of annoying. But when it is working, it's beautiful because it's got this very soft rotation. And so you get this different angle of attack, and it forces the player to pay attention as they're clicking. So you're not just spamming the button over and over. So let's take a look at this. Then we have turn on new opponent, the trigger. So we turn this one on because it's initially off. A unit owned by player 1 is issued an order targeting an object. Now, what this means, and we have it turned off initially because we don't want the player to have this one on instead of the primary where they first engage, they get close, and then it locks onto that target, the nearest target to you. This one would override that if this was on initially. So we have it turned off. Once combat is engaged, then this trigger will turn on. And so what this one does is essentially, if you, the player, decide to target somebody new, we need to highlight that new target and then unhighlight the old one. That's what this trigger is doing. So we have an if then else statement. So like before, if then else, and then we have and condition instead of or, which means this and this have to happen before the actions take place. So distance between the position of the ordered unit, which is the one, at the start of this trigger, and position of target unit of issued order, which means whatever unit it is that we are targeting. If it's less than or equal to 110, which is about attack range, it's pretty close, and target unit of issued order is not equal to our primary target. So those two have to be met, because if we retarget the same guy that's already targeted, that arrow is going to keep popping up over the head, and it doesn't look good. Then we're going to destroy the variable set special effect, because remember, I mentioned before, all I have is last created special effect, and it wasn't destroying anything. So I set the variable of target of attack to be that special effect from before. So now I have something to reference. Oh, sorry. I was getting thirsty. Then all we're going to really do at this point is create the special effect over the head of the new fight opponent lock, because we are now setting the variable for fight camera opponent lock to the target unit of issued order, which is the person we are now targeting. We're setting the variable to reference that person now, and then we're going to reference that later. And then we change the vertex coloring of that unit to, normal colors. And then we pick every unit within 700, just like before, and we reduce their colors by 50% and transparency by 50%. So, in short, I think that's pretty much it for the camera. Now, let's talk about how I did that right-click to attack thing without any damage values whatsoever, because that's really exciting, and I love how the text pops up and flies in these different directions. I love it. It's like an actual, adventure game. It's super, super cool. So right now you can attack as the affluent suit or the harvester suit. They're these different outfits, and they have different damage values. And so right now you guys were watching the harvester one. Affluence is no different, just different damage values. So I'll only show you the one because showing you both doesn't make sense. They're exactly the same, just with different values. So if you go to my initialization trigger, at the start of the game, I set all of these different values and things. And so if we take a look, there are some that we're setting here. So we have harvester anim 1 and 2, and then we have these different string values. All this is really saying, is I want both attack animations to play, and it's a trigger-based thing, so I have to reference, the variable itself. So in this one, this is an integer variable, the base harvester damage. Now this is really exciting because what I have planned is building a crafting system in this game, and as you craft different things, you can craft runes by mining different ores, finding different gems, and you can modify your base damage for your suit, and then it also gets modified by the level of your character or the level of your suit, because each suit's got a different level. And that's really, really exciting because now we can modify what kind of damage we can do inside of the trigger editor instead of having to modify the unit's actual damage. And so we have the base harvester damage of 20. And now that that's been set back here, we have these different sound effects that have been set as well. Not as important, but it is important to, let me delete that. Not as important for you to know because this is just what allows for the sound effects to play the 3 different attack sounds as you hit. It's like this sound versus this sound, like. So we're going to go over here to fight. Now, just to be clear, if you guys try replicating this on your own, this trigger, you got to understand that I do have a glitch in here that I don't know what's causing it. It's very small, but it is very annoying. So I'm going to, obviously figure that out before I release this to the public, this game. For some reason, every once in a while, you'll right click on the opponent and your character just stands there. But then if you like click on the ground next to them and then click them, he starts fighting, no problem. So I got to figure that out. But besides that, it works great. So this trigger is called Fight. So a unit owned by player 1 red is issued an order targeting an object. An object meaning a unit or something or other. Now, this is what it checks on. It says if the distance between the ordered unit, which is the unit that is being ordered to do something, and the position of the target unit of issued order is less than or equal to 110, meaning we have to be close. We have to be within hitting range for this to even work, because this is an if-then-else statement. You guys already know. If this is met, then do these actions. So for then, we order the ordered unit to stop. So that way your character doesn't just keep running, right? Your unit stops in place, and this might be causing my glitch, I'm not sure. But he stops in place. We set the variable target unit of issued order, which is a unit variable, to the target unit of issued order. So that way we know which unit to reference, so we can do the math on their health to drop their health down, because we're not actually doing it. So then we follow that up with another if-then-else statement. And we have if the ordered unit is equal to, if it's equal to affluence suit, then we run the deal damage affluence, which is this trigger over here. Else, meaning if it's not that guy, what else would you like me to do? Well, as you saw, we were in our harvester suit. So that means our trigger went through all of this, and then it said if the ordered unit is harvester, which is what it was, then we run deal damage harvester checking conditions. So deal damage harvester. As you can see, we have no event because it's just running the trigger. We don't need an event. We wait 0.1 seconds. And remember from earlier, I said we are setting our animation so he can swing this way versus this way. And then we're playing the bash sounds. And then we're going to run harvester attack dice. All this does, as you can see, no event, we just run it. We set the variable damage dice harvester to, again, we have damage dice harvester, and we have another variable under arithmetic. This variable is the base harvester damage, which was set at the start of the game, okay? So the math that it's doing is it's taking base damage, which was set to, I believe, 20 in initialization. And then we're adding -5 to 5 as a random integer to that. So that's why you see the fluctuation between the -5 and 5 on the 20. Sometimes we're doing like 17 damage, sometimes we're doing 21, 22, and that's the reason why. So the damage dice harvester is set to the base damage plus -5 to 5, somewhere in there. And now our damage dice has been set, so we can go back over here, and then we store the integer of the life of the target unit of issued order as mob health. Let's go ahead and open this up. This is important because we're now storing the current health of the person we're attacking before we do any damage. We wait 0.25 seconds because during this time, you got to understand, this is all happening within less than a second. Your character is swinging and it's doing all of these little commands in order to get this done. So he's about here in his swing. We wait 0.25 seconds, and then we set the life of target unit of issued order, which is the variable that we set back here. So basically the unit we're attacking, to arithmetic, life of the target unit of issued order minus the damage dice of the harvester. So remember, damage dice of Harvester took the base damage and then plus or minus, 5 on there. And so it's subtracting whatever the variable ended up being. So the dice rolled and it subtracted it from the total health of the person we are attacking. And so now what we have to do is we are now taking the life of the target unit of issued order and storing it as 2 mob health. And that's just a label. All that means is that's our second value. So now we have back here, we set the first value as mob health, the second value as 2 mob health. So we took the health before the damage was dealt, we took it afterwards, and now we're going to create floating text that reads as a string. We load the value of mob health, and then we subtract the load mob health 2. And so if you do the math between the health before and the health afterwards, you get a value of roughly 20, down to 15, up to 25, somewhere in there, because that's our damage dice. And we display it above the target unit of issued order, which is the unit we're attacking, with a Z offset of -90. So now Z, if you guys know your X, Y's, and Z's, so you got X, which is going sideways, left to right, you got Y going up and down, and then you've got Z going literally up and down, not, north and south. We're going up and down now. So -90, instead of being above their head, it brings it down to right here, around their chest area. And we have a font size between 12 and 14. It randomly selects. That way it's, it looks fluid. And I have the color set to yellow, and we have 10% transparency, meaning it's 90% visible. We changed the last created floating text, which is the one we just made, to disable permanence, so it does go away. We changed the lifespan of that text to 0.5, so it's going to fade away in half a second. We set the velocity to a random real number between 50 and 150. That way it floats away at different rates. And then we have it float away in any random angle between 0 and 360. That's why you see it kind of going away in these different directions like that. And then we change the fading age of last created floating text to 0. We wait 0.15 seconds, then we turn on the trigger called Bite. And we're back here. So essentially, if you take a look at this trigger right here, we go through all these commands, and the very last one is turn off this trigger. Why is this important? Because we now run deal damage harvester once we've targeted our unit and the position is, 110 away. We order our unit to stop. We set the variable to say this is our target. And then we have an if then else statement saying, if it's the harvester suit, run deal damage harvester, then turn this trigger off. Well, this trigger is now turned off. It's turned off. And we go to deal damage harvester. It runs all of this and then it turns it back on. Why is that important? Because now we can click multiple times and then we can go back, but we can't just spam click because we have these weights built in. It's 0.1, 0.5 plus 0.25 plus 0.15. And so what you have is now, if you do the math on that, exactly 1 second. So we can theoretically click as fast as we want to click, but it's not going to affect anything because we have a wait time of bare minimum 1 second before the fight trigger turns back on, which allows us to right click and then go through the deal damage process again. So just for kicks and giggles, let's go ahead and try out the map again now that we can see it. So here we are. We are now engaging in combat, as you can see. That's so nice. You got the arrow above the head, get the camera rotating a little bit. We only deal damage whenever we fight or click, and camera returns to normal. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Now let's go over here and we're going to pick a fight with these guys. And you know what? I'm going to attack this guy instead. Look at that. I want to fight this one. How great is that? That is so cool. Oh, new target acquired. I'm having too much fun. And donezo. So if you guys like what you see, definitely like, comment, and subscribe. I would love to have more viewers on this channel as far as the Reforged content goes, as far as the other gaming content goes. And I'm really excited for what this project holds in the future, because this is probably going to be my last major map that I do inside of World Editor. It's kind of like a last hurrah type of thing. And also it's a proof of concept for a game that Mathelios and I do some playthroughs with him. You should check out his channel. It's a proof of concept for a game that Mathelios and I would like to make someday. It's going to act as basically a giant demo test product of what game we would like to make, but it's going to be a single player format instead of an MMO format, which is what we want to make eventually. And hopefully as you guys watch this, you guys can kind of see the vision of what we're going for here. It's just right now, with how much we have going on, trying to take the time to learn how to program a game from scratch inside of something like Unity or inside of Unreal Engine. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we kind of want to get our ideas down on paper, get some people looking at our stuff, maybe get some feedback, and then see how it does. And so we would love to have you, is what I'm trying to say. So definitely stick around. There's lots more content coming, not just Reforged, but other content as well. I hope to see you guys later.